Oh.
Woo! We are live. Happy hump day, everyone. This fabulous Wednesday night. Welcome to another Basement Ready Arcade podcast. Just want to say hello. I'm excited to be back. You know, we've had a great week. We kicked off Friday kicked off a Friday fireworks BRAP rant that Gaming Forte was a part of. If you haven't checked that rant out, what do you think, Forte? Should the viewers check it out?
Oh man, it was fire. We went into a tangent for like 30 to 40 minutes on a completely different subject. So it was definitely, so you basically got two shows in one. So yeah, it was definitely worth it. And you definitely want to check out that and see what we had to say around those two subjects.
Yeah, definitely check out Tuesday's BRAP rant too. With me and Forte, we talked about why this generation was one of the most important generations to win. So definitely check that out. But big shout out to everyone in the live chat. I want to say thank you to everyone who's joining us. Thank you for those new subscribers. We got some new subscribers that just subbed to the channel recently. But we're going to have the rest of the panel. B-Money, Slow-Mo. Slow-Mo's just leaving the bakery. He's making bread right now because he catches L's. And then we're going to have Eric Jackson joining us from South Florida. So, but we do have a very special guest, first-time guest on BRAP. We have Mr. Hoeg Law, or can we call you Hoeg?
Mr. Hoeg Law. You can call me Rick. I go by Rick.
Okay.
I just gotta have the branding up there. You know, that's what I do. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely Rick, and I think I would feel weird if you just referred to me by my law firm name. So it's all good.
Yeah, I think I say that because, like, when I was talking to Cognito, I was like, hey, we're going to have Hoeg on. He's like, yeah, Hoeg Law is great. So, you know, I think
Rick,
I was...
You know, a lot of the people that follow me from Easy Allies call me Hoeg because that's what they did. So you can always call me Hoeg. I tend to refer to myself in the third person as Rick on my videos. So, you know, it is what it is. You can call me whatever. I will respond to anything in the variations of Richard, Rick, or Hoeg.
Or Hoeg, okay. All right. So I may call you Hoeg because I feel like that's where, you know, what I've known you, your name that I've known in terms of like just listening to you on the ILP. Big shout out to the Iron Lords podcast, by the way. Great friends of the podcast. So Hoeg, man, thank you again. It's definitely a pleasure to have you on, and I want to pick your brain here, Hoeg.
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun.
Yeah, so just real quick, if you could let everyone, because this is the first time that you've been on the show.
Yep.
If you could just give people just a little insight into your gaming background, you know, your knowledge of gaming, because I've heard you talk on the ILP about all things gaming, but also you kind of insert this unique legal perspective to things in the gaming industry.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, yeah, I've been practicing law now for 15 years, which sounds like a crazy number since I feel like I just started, but excuse me. But yeah, I started doing business law. So I did transactions, venture capital, mergers and acquisitions, all these fun things. And I have taken that practice after I left Big Law to start my own firm and melded it with my love of technology, software, video games. I'm here in Michigan. I'm right outside the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So I help a lot of spinoffs. And there's just some crazy tech coming out of research universities all across the country. But the one I'm most familiar with is the University of Michigan. Just what I usually describe as James Bond technology, stuff that just comes out and does all this cool stuff. And as part of that, I really kind of gained a book of business in software and focused on marketing the firm in what I would consider odd ways for a law firm, for a business law firm to market itself. So I went and I sponsored Easy Allies for 2+ years until they now have Brandon Jones talking about wireless earbuds and whatever else Rooster Teeth puts in his mouth. But I did that for 2 years. I sponsor a local, I guess national, but local to me, Michigan sports blog called the MGO blog. And that love of video games was really something that I had from when I was a kid, right? I don't know how many people's stories match this one, but my dad really brought it to me. He was always super big into technology. We had one of those old Macintoshes with a cardboard chimney on the top. We had an Intellivision, an Atari 2600. That graduated into having a CDI and a 3DO and a TurboGrafx. My dad loved this stuff. And so I consider my video game knowledge extensive, probably more so than any human being needs, because I tend to be a little bit on the older side of the folks talking about these things online right now. Have to kind of bring, DOS prompts back and references to TurboGrafx 16 games and things of that nature, all the way. And basically, at the end of 2018, I had a number of deals fall through in about the Thanksgiving time frame that we're supposed to close by the end of the year. And if you're a corporate lawyer or anybody involved in business, if all those deals get pushed past the end of the year, nothing much is going to happen for 4 or 5 weeks. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you've got your own law firm and you're trying to figure out what to do with your time, I had a couple of clients at that time that were YouTubers, of all things, and we're talking about their analytics and their data and what information they were collecting. And I didn't know exactly what they were looking at. And I said, hey, I've wanted to know exactly how to do that, what that looks like. I had some virality at Hoeg Law for reasons that have nothing to do with law when I wrote a blog post about my dislike of The Last Jedi, which we can go into if we have to. But that became something that I got introduced across the internet to places I'd never been before. I'd never really been on Reddit. I'd never, ever been on Tumblr. And all these various places where this article went, I kind of followed along and kind of got to know people. And part of that was YouTube. And people talked about my article on YouTube. I said, well, okay, I want to learn how to edit. And so virtual legality was born. And virtual legality is basically a concept that I had that I could talk about law and business and what I know from that experience of 15 years and combine it with things that I feel are more entry ready, that people are more interested in, pop culture news, right? I did a whole series in virtual legality about when Spider-Man was being tossed back and forth between Sony and Disney and what that means, what a contract negotiation looks like, how that happens. I did a whole talk in virtual legality about when Bungie left Activision because we had that contract available to us after the Infinity Ward lawsuit, right? So we could actually look at that contract. I could talk about what license terms are, hopefully illuminate, educate people, and have that conversation with something that they were interested in, something that they might tune into to BRAP for or anything else, and have that conversation from a legal and business perspective when I think there are a lot of good people trying to do good work in games journalism. I don't think a lot of them have that background. And so if I can offer that assistance, I will. And that led to virtual legality. That led to me being quoted in places like IGN and Variety and really strange places, the Washington Post, that I'd never expected to be, and kind of led into this burgeoning practice where I now have a number of game developers in my book of business. I now have a number of YouTubers, a lot of software companies in my book of business. And the firm is doing well. And I get to talk about video games and pop culture on a regular basis and put out virtual legality episodes really when anything kind of catches my eye and I think I can add something to. So we just put out episode, I want to say 173 this afternoon. And that's in a little more than 13 months. So we're having a lot of fun with it. I think a lot of people are liking it. And we've got, 7,500 subscribers in that 13-month period. So I'm feeling pretty good about that growth and I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
Hoeg, I gotta say that's awesome. Cool. You mentioned Variety, Washington Post. By the way, I live in the DMV, outside Washington D.C. So that's awesome that you've been on WAPO, we call it. But that's seriously that's awesome. Hey, by the way, big shout out to speaking of the Iron Lords, we have Cognito says Hoeg on BRAP, salute, and Luca.
He and I have been having conversations for a long time.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I love talking video games with him. We also, by the way, big shout out to the Ash and Luke with the $5 super chat. Wow, we can't believe Geoff skipped E3 because he couldn't leak any console prices. You hate to see it. It's she says she's making a joke. I know, and I know exactly what she's referring to, which is kind of funny. But what's up, E Jax? I saw you sneak into the back door there. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? How it going?
It
cool.
is
How you doing, sir?
It's going, man. It is going. But Hoeg, I gotta ask you a question, man. I kind of asked you this in DM, and I'm only bringing it up because I actually had a conversation with someone about this particular topic, and unfortunately, I wasn't rude by any stretch of the imagination. This person eventually blocked me. I'm not going to say any names, but and Forte and I were discussing this on our last BRAP Brain on Tuesday, and it has to deal with our. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Our console exclusives anti-consumer. I'm laughing here. Our consoles exclusives anti-consumer.
Yeah, and I think when you asked me that, I gave you some kind of legalese answer about maybe, right? I mean, that tends to be what I do, right?
Yeah. Something like that.
No. So yeah, I mean, I think, look, there are certain console exclusives that, given a specific set of facts, could be considered against the fan base, against the consumer. The one that jumps to mind, of course, is Rise of the Tomb Raider, which was announced for everything, and then just one day Microsoft rolls in and says, "Nah, it's just Xbox for a year." But that chain of events winds up looking like, well, it was always coming to Xbox. It's still coming to Xbox. All you bought was turning off the other spigots. And so that only ever looks, I think, to the outside world like something that is just against the other fans, the PlayStation fans. I don't think it was ever on Nintendo, the PC fans. And to what end? To kind of try to make your thing look more appreciative, to look better against something that has less now because you paid money for it. That looks anti-consumer. The kind of exclusives that I think you're more likely to see, that are more regularly seen, are the things that are funded, right? You know, Sony makes God of War to sell PlayStations. They probably put more money into it than they actually have to sell that product. They do it to be a tech showcase for the PlayStation and for their console. They do the same thing with some of their other exclusives. So my general argument is, and this doesn't work for everything, and people usually pick at these kinds of things of, oh, what about this one? What about this one? In general, fewer games would exist if these console manufacturers didn't make some exclusives to sell their consoles. That's their business model. Now you're seeing Microsoft move away from that business model, which is why you are seeing Microsoft take a different approach, that it's going to be on PC and it's going to be on Xbox, and maybe it'll be other places. I can't guarantee you that the Game Pass won't come to the Switch in a few years, because Microsoft is all about selling that software as a service and getting that revenue generation on a year-by-year, quarter-by-quarter basis right now. And I think it's a very interesting business model. People really haven't tried it in the games industry before. Could succeed, might not. I think that the industry on the whole is strengthened by having what amounts to these three very disparate models. You've got Sony selling the box under the TV. You've got Microsoft selling the revenue in the SaaS. And you've got Nintendo doing whatever the hell Nintendo's doing, selling you cardboard, whatever they feel like. I love Nintendo. And so I think that's great. I think that's essentially a petri dish of different models, what people want. And Xbox and Microsoft were kind of moving that way with TV in 2013. Clearly that was wrong. The market either wasn't ready for that or they were just aimed wrong. You know, we could get into that discussion as well. I think Game Pass is a good thing. I think them pushing for it is good. I think them buying things like, you know, Obsidian and Ninja Theory and others could be broadly perceived of as bad. You won't get the same breadth of things in other places that you might have before those purchases. But I think in order to have those models, you're going to have those investments. And that's kind of, you give a little to get a little. And so I don't view it as anti-consumer as much more complicated than pro or anti, which is a long way of being a very lawyer answer of, you know, maybe.
That's a great answer. And by the way, a big shout out to our friend Optimus Co with a $15 super chat. Says, sup family,
Nice.
What does it mean to look anti-consumer? And he says, can we get a spoiler-free episode tonight, please? That comment's directed at Slow-Mo, who likes to spoil games. Well, Slow-Mo, we had Optimus Code, and Optimus was playing a game that is probably about 10 years old, and Slow-Mo spoiled, I think, one of the major plot twists in that game, and Optimus had not played it yet. So
yeah, he's playing Heavy Rain.
He's playing Heavy Rain, yeah. And,
press X to Jason, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's talking about. So
you got to press X. I thought we were talking about Revan, and I thought that was well past the statute of limitations, folks.
Well, Hoeg, I want to ask you one more question too, because this is interesting. I heard you bring up Game Pass on the Iron Lords podcast, and you know, you mentioned that, you know, it look, well, nobody here would argue that it presents a tremendous value. It's a cool thing. You know, I use Game Pass. I use Game Pass for PC. Everyone on the panel here uses Game Pass. Like, it's
jump
great.
on that dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Got it locked in for like 2 years for $1. I mean, you can't argue that. You can't argue the value there. You know, it's great. So, God, I'm starting to sound like Mooch. I've been on Crossfire 2 weeks in a row. So, you know, but I heard you bring up something interesting, because a lot of the you know, the things you hear amongst the gaming community is that This is Game Pass is the future. It's this, it's that. Everyone should follow suit. That's great, and I understand that argument because as a gamer, hell, I wouldn't complain if Sony had something exactly identical to Game Pass where they were dropping first party day and day. But that's another conversation. You mentioned an interesting point on the ILP though, which I thought was kind of interesting, was that you mentioned that while this is a new service, there's potentially challenges, and I guess like the one question we always hear people ask. Is this service viable? And I understand that's Microsoft's job to figure out, but I think it's an interesting conversation because we've never seen anything like this in the gaming industry. What are your thoughts on its viability and some of the challenges that might present itself with a service like Game Pass?
Yeah, I mean, I think this model can work, but it's a math problem, right? When we talk about these things, there's a lot of math that goes into it. What are these third parties in particular? What are they getting paid when somebody downloads their game on Game Pass? Are they happy about being a part of that service? Are they happy with their ultimate returns? Microsoft is still figuring that out, not because they had any other option. These are the kinds of things that really can only be tested over a period of time. And figuring out what that is, what your price for Game Pass then has to be, what exactly you're going to do in terms of your internal qualifications for your revenue generation from the things that aren't going out with any price necessarily. When you talk about the new Hellblade is going to come out straight to Game Pass. Was Gears 5 a success? All these things you have to come up with new key performance indicators internally at Microsoft. You have to figure out what success looks like when it looks entirely different from what you have been doing in this division for 20 years. And so I don't think that there's any barrier to them solving it. It's just a difficult problem, and it's an easy one to screw up. Right? We talk about the dollar. Absolutely. Yeah. I immediately extended my Xbox Live for 3 years, which, they're happy about. And then I took my $1 for the 3 years. I mean, it's silly not to. It's what I saw that offer. I said, yeah, absolutely. I will do that.
No brainer.
But that's just like, you look at something like Disney Plus. These things are always priced at the start to get those metrics up, your users up, because you want to be able to present to the world that this thing is a success and it's great, and you want everybody to feel good about it and have goodwill about this project. And Game Pass has succeeded with that, just like Disney Plus did with their 25 million instant subscribers or what have you. But I don't think anybody thinks that $5 is the end point for Disney Plus. I don't think anybody thinks, they're silly if they do, that $1 for 3 years is the end point for Xbox Game Pass. So they are collecting this money. They are collecting this information on these users about how they're using the service, what it might look like 3 years down the line, how it needs to be priced and all this stuff. But they're working not just with themselves. The Game Pass has to have at least some mortar, right? If you consider the stuff that they're making in-house and first party as the bricks that go into this whole service, it needs to have those things that come out every couple weeks that are just kind of random that you might not otherwise buy. And you're like, hey, that looks interesting. And then you download it and you're like, it's not for me, but I didn't spend any money, so it's fine. And you need those things to kind of populate the service so it feels live, so it feels vibrant, so people feel good about having purchased the pass. But those kinds of relationships are always in flux. And while Xbox and PlayStation have some amount of understanding of what those need to look like to make their third-party partners happy from their gold and their apologies. What's the PlayStation Network pass that you buy to get multiplayer?
PlayStation Plus.
See, I ran out of plus. I'll just throw plus on everything.
Yep.
PlayStation Plus, that you get those free games. So you have some of those kinds of metrics in place. You need to continue to collect that data. The end point of this is that it's a new business model, and it's going to take work to figure out what success looks like, then to sustain that success. And you can fall off the cliff the wrong way, right? I think the example I used on the Iron Lords was, you think of Movie Pass.
Yes.
And Movie Pass, when you really break it down, at some point pretty early in their cycle, they had enough success, but every success was a loss. And then that compounded and compounded and compounded, and it was all illusory. And they never quite figured out how to appease the movie theaters and make money. And Microsoft's not that silly. They're not that stupid, and they can also subsidize the crap out of this thing, because the thing I try to remind people of is that, somewhat unlike Sony, definitely unlike Nintendo, Microsoft gaming is a sliver of Microsoft. Microsoft is a behemoth compared to the rest of these folks. And so they can subsidize a lot of their endeavors, their adventures in the gaming space. And so they will do that. But will it be a long-term success? they're all in on it. They've put their eggs in this basket. So I think it will be a success come hell or high water, but it might not be as friction-free as it looks right this second.
Very interesting points, man. I appreciate that point of view, because I often when you hear this conversation, it typically, unfortunately, I don't think anyone, I shouldn't say anyone, but I see people just take this down the route of fanboyism. So it's good to hear a perspective that is I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. I guess practical, for lack of a better word. I
own them all. I want the best games that I can have on all the systems. I have no specific person that I'm backing on this. I tend to like Sony's exclusive third-party adventure games. I tend to like all of the third-party games on my X the most, as the strongest system that I have under my TV right now. And basically, I'm playing all the Japanese-type games on my Nintendo Switch. So I'm enjoying them all for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find it.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, man.
That's because I was gonna say, because I find it interesting, like how, like Enrique just kind of pointed to, like how the conversation goes. Like you said, Richard, Game Pass is great. Enrique said it's great. I can think it's an amazing service. So from a consumer gamer standpoint, my only role in this is to subscribe to it and sit back and enjoy. That's
the games. Yeah,
that's the contract Microsoft and I have between that, right? But also, as gamers, there's nothing wrong with us having the conversation, because that's what we do. We discuss things. But it seems, people are okay if you say it's great, it's fantastic, it's the future. But the minute you push back, then you're pocket watching, right?
Well, I think a lot of people, Game Pass is new enough and it's good enough right outside the gate. I do think that there's a knee-jerk reaction that I know I have personally, which is like, this feels a little too good to be true right now.
Right? Exactly.
Like, Outer Worlds comes out, gets all these great grades. I want to play it. Oh, I actually have it for, quote unquote free. It's just on my Xbox. That's like, that's not right. That can't be how this works. And it isn't long term. So I think people want to have the conversation, which is like, well, they can't release a game like that and not get any money from me ever. So what does this look like? When does the other shoe drop? I think that's one of the reasons that these conversations happen right now.
Right. Because you said something very interesting on ILP, and you said, and we've all kind of done it. I know I've done it. My spending habits have drastically changed on Xbox. In general, actually, they've changed. This seems like a Game Pass game.
So Remnant.
I'm gonna sit back and
I felt terrible. My brother, game developer, gives me the greatest tips on games because he really dives into why the rules work and all this stuff. He says, got to get Remnant, got to pick it up. And I was playing something. I think I was playing through maybe Death Stranding at the time. And I say, oh yeah, I looked at it. That really looks like a Game Pass game to me, Tom. and he said, yeah, probably. And it was only like 4 weeks later, and I was like, bingo, I'm a winner.
Hey,
so I wonder with that, do people get like analysis paralysis?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And is that the side of it where first party, they're going to be fine. They're going to be in their day and they're within like the fold. But does that kind of affect like a smaller dev? And again, guys, don't jump on me because I'm talking to Hoeg about this. We're having a discussion. It's not that I'm pocket watching. It's not that I'm worrying about the dev. People will be fine. But there are some situations where people could fall through the cracks.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, if I'm the Remnant developer, and I think they're Gunfire, I want to say, then I'm looking at it and saying, yeah, that would have been a sale. Rick straight up would have bought me for $40, I think the game was, except I waited it out. Right. And, they probably get whatever they get for me downloading on Game Pass. I mean, there has to be some metric that they're using to pay those folks. Right. But it's going to be less. And you have to hit a certain amount that they don't get direct money into their pocket. So I look at that and say, yeah, that's going to be a problem. I think you saw some articles come out potentially about some games getting designed for Game Pass that created a bit of a stir. I actually thought some of the quotes that came out, and I can't remember the game, were okay. They basically said, hey, we're going to have free people in there. We need to make the entry smoother, which makes total sense to me. Like one of the things you often see on Game Pass and what you always see on the mobile, the free games, is that if you have that free access, they tend to be lower grades because a lot of people just download whatever and then say, 1 star. And so you want to make that as smooth as possible. So that makes sense to me. But there is a real risk for, okay, Game Pass can get my main application in the door, and then I mostly make money selling DLC and widgets and skins and things, do I reframe my game as a quasi Game Pass Fortnite thing when that isn't what's best creatively? I can speak. It's it's late at night. So I mean, I think that's an open question, and I think as we move more towards those kinds of services, and I think Sony will probably have some kind of shadow version of it, but I think Microsoft's really all in more than Sony will be on this
I think so too.
project.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. Real quick, we got another super chat by our good buddy Optimus Code. This question's for you, Hoeg. It says, how would a PC gamer introduce an anti-consumer lawsuit? Would it be class action? What would be the PC gamer's chance of winning?
Well, anti-consumer is not going to be a cause of action, so we should start there. That's not going to be something that you can just sue on. That reads in the law a little bit like they were mean. So you need something that they breached. You need some obligation that they failed in, a contract term that they violated. And then, you're looking at some difficulty. Probably most of the EULAs that you enter into with respect to these games are going to have arbitration clauses and anti-class action clauses. Some states are going to hold those to be unenforceable, states like California. Most other states are going to allow those kinds of things, so class action is difficult to form. And then one of the things I talk about in virtual legality a lot is, and I know this sounds bad for a lot of people that are asking these questions on these topics, but the government, the court system, the various things that you could do, they don't much care in terms of priority for your $40 loss on a software purchase. Most of these agencies, most of these things that you could otherwise go and ask for help from the government on, care about things that can accidentally kill you, or major losses that would bankrupt you and things along those lines. So yes, you can go and you can seek these things out, but I have to give you the cynical view of this from a lawyer's perspective is that if you've got a small scale purchase class action that needs to be really big to even be brought, most of the money from that, even if it's successful, is going to go to a very opportunistic plaintiff's attorney firm. That's how a class action works in the United States. And so mostly it's not going to make sense. Mostly, yes, that means that on the gray area in particular, some of these companies can play games with their EULAs and do other things that you don't like. But we can continue to call them out in places like Virtual Legality in this podcast. Legal action is probably not the best method. Political and business pressure is probably going to be more successful in the long run on those kinds of things.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Very insightful.
Yeah, sorry.
And Optimus Code actually did follow up. He's like, so then so Optimus Code just followed up. He says, so then if anti-consumer is a legal term and it's almost impossible to enforce, what does the term actually mean?
It's not a legal term, right? So I would say that it means whatever the speaker wants it to mean. I took it to mean in your question, and I take it to mean when I'm reading, Reset Era or Reddit or wherever. It means I feel that this company behavior or strategy is overly selfish, is favoring the company over the fans or the purchasers that help the company or industry operate. That I think we all kind of have an intuitive understanding that the companies need to make some money to exist, but that anti-consumer crosses that line that speaker has for enough money to exist, and now you are being greedy or selfish or otherwise problematic, as I see online. So, I think it's unfortunately a term that doesn't mean anything outside of what the speaker means it to mean, and you kind of have to take it by context for whatever they're talking about.
Very interesting. I want to move on to a topic that kind of I think is near and dear to myself and Eric Jackson and Gaming Forte because B Money, you've been to a few of these E3. This is the first year we're going to. By the way, Hoeg, thank you again for the insight on that. I really.
Oh yeah, no, you don't need to thank me. No, I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. It's so we're heading out to E3 this year. It's my first E3. It's a bucket list item for me. Something I've been wanting to do for years. B Money, I think you've been in like 4 or 5. I think is that right?
I've been in 3.
3.
Nice.
Okay. I think B Money's hung out with like Aaron Greenberg. Did you met Phil? I think too, right?
Yeah, I hung out with Phil, Aaron. pretty much every Xbox executive, Adam Boyes, a lot of people in the gaming industry.
So B Money is connected. If you guys don't know, he is connected to the major players in the industry. So you know, there's there's been a lot of talks about ever since Sony pulled out. You know, now second year in a row at E3. You know, we know Nintendo left the traditional E3 stage years ago. They still have a presence on the show floor there at E3. E3 has obviously gone through some changes. They've opened it up more to fans. But E3 just lost, I think, one of their loudest voices, if you will. You know, a gentleman who has put a lot of work into the gaming industry. You know, created the VGAs. You know, speaking of Easy Allies, right?
Yep.
You know, Geoff Keighley is not going to be at this year's E3. And let me tell you something. When I saw this tweet, I was shocked. Like, I was literally like, what? Like what's going on here? And I want to read the statement from Geoff Keighley on E3. He says, for the past 25 years, I've attended every electronic entertainment expo. Covering, hosting, and sharing E3 has always been a highlight of my year, not to mention a defining part of my career. I've debated what to say about E3 2020. While I want to support the developers who will showcase their work, I also need to be open and honest with you, the fans, about precisely what to expect from me. I've made the difficult decision to decline to produce E3 Coliseum. For the first time in 25 years, I will not be participating in E3. I look forward to supporting the industry in other ways and at other events in the future. So, again, this this came as a shock to me personally. I mean, I just wasn't. Would have never crossed my mind that Geoff Keighley might miss E3, right? And so obviously this news comes out, and we're hearing the chatter again. Is E3 dead? Is it dying? What's going to happen with E3? You know, what does the ESA really need to do? And the ESA's had some issues in the past, I might add. I believe Variety did they put this is I think a year ago. They wrote an article about the inner workings of the ESA and how it was a toxic place to work. They eventually fired their executive director. I'm not sure if they hired a new ED. We know that about the leaks that they the leaks, the contact information for journalists and media that was leaked. They never addressed that. They never even apologized, from my understanding. And then recently the attendees list, I think, was just leaked today. So, this is, I don't know what's going on at E3. Again, this is, I've never been there. And I don't Hoeg, have you been to any E3s?
No. My brother has been to a few, but I've never made my way out there.
So let me ask you something. Just given that, this is considered the grand stage of the gaming industry, like, how big of a deal do you think this is? Like, is this like a huge loss to E3? Does this further, compound that narrative of, man, E3 is just, it's dying, it's dead, or there needs to be major changes?
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, if you look at E3, it's had a number of different iterations, right? The current iteration of E3 is not the only one that it's had. It was by the airport for a few years.
Yeah.
It's had different versions of itself. Back when I started following E3, which makes me old, but it was, honest to God, business presentations. There were PowerPoints and bar graphs and charts. And, I love that stuff because, I turned into a business lawyer when I grew up. But I had to buy, eventually, DVDs that were sent to me in the mail to get the footage that you can get now. And it won't look like this, like it has in the last 5 years, in the near future. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's gone and dead. It means that it's going to transition to something else that maybe people will love, maybe they won't. And then it will transition again. The video game industry isn't going to stop needing some kind of trade extravaganza. It might not always be E3. It could become Gamescom or Tokyo Game Show or somewhere else. But I don't know that it's going to go away completely. I do think it's going to fundamentally change. And I talked about that a little bit on my channel. But one of the things I said is you definitely have a circumstance now where the main video game players believe they can control the message the best with their own kind of direct access delivered directly online, and that costs them a lot less. And what you're seeing with Sony's comments and with Geoff Keighley's, you know, I don't know if you saw it, but Geoff actually responded to a bunch of things online.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that really jumped out at me is he responded to someone and said something along the lines of, I just am not comfortable participating in the show based on what I know today.
Yeah.
And that's the one that really like leaps out and says, oh, okay. So this is a full kind of philosophical split with what the ESA wants to make E3. So I think whatever changes are coming to E3, they've already been decided upon. Now, if you remember in September, that kind of media relations PowerPoint package got leaked.
Yes.
And had all the things about celebrity activations and talking about various things. And my guess is that they went through with that. And so you see Sony's statement that they made when they dropped out matches a lot of the tone in what Geoff Keighley is saying here, which is essentially, I disagree fundamentally, you know, to do a little Mark Hamill, Ryan Johnson impression here. I disagree fundamentally with the direction you're taking the show. And so what I have to do then is I have to back out. Some people asked Geoff if it was about money. He said we never got that far. Geoff Keighley appears to have decided to not go to E3 based on a fundamental shift in what E3 is planning to be from the ESA.
I'm sorry, Hoeg, that's actually a great point. I just want to
absolutely
mention something he said he said this to IGN. He said, as I looked at the information that was available to me about this year's show, and based on my conversations with the ESA, so he's had conversations with them, I just didn't feel like we could do a Coliseum that would really deliver to the fans. So you're right there. There's some kind of disconnect here.
This is, to me, this is the canary.
Yeah.
Sony maybe, but we expected Sony might do its own thing because they're weird and they don't care anymore. But Geoff Keighley is the ambassador of games, right?
Yes.
Like, you can call him a shill, and he is a shill, but he's a shill for everybody equally. He's a shill for the damn industry. And so he goes out there and says essentially this cryptic stuff that basically says you're going to have to ask the ESA, and you can expect that unless they make some major changes behind the scenes, whatever they're going to announce that is different or weird, it is going to be real. Like, that PowerPoint was not something that they put aside and said, oh, crazy marketing firm, we're going to do what we always did. This suggests that there are fundamental changes to what this thing is. And my bet, and I like to be an optimist, I like to be a happy-go-lucky guy, just like all corporate lawyers, as I'm sure you know. But I like to be a happy-go-lucky guy, and I say, my bet is that this thing probably doesn't look like what we, the people that are on this podcast that follow these things very closely, would probably want it to look like. They're probably going to try to do a hipness that's too much and do something that we don't enjoy and is not focused on the games and tries to be some kind of entertainment extravaganza. That would be my bet. And Geoff Keighley says, well, if we're not going to focus on the games, then I'm not interested in essentially lending my name in support of this endeavor. And I think that's how you get to something like this. All speculative. I have no inside track on any of this. But based on what we know from the ESA, it does appear like there's a fundamental shift that already happened, and that the statements from Sony that basically said, we think it's important to focus on games, and then Geoff Keighley saying, I think it's important to focus on games, those combined to say, oh, something is up with what's going to happen in June.
You know, that really kind of tracks with what that Variety article said about where the split began with a lot of the organizations, a lot of the publishers that are in the ESA. So like Sony's in the ESA, EA, Microsoft, all of them are in there, and they all kind of like lend their. Although there is an organization that's out here in DC that actually lobbies on behalf of the video game industry, and that's like their primary role when it comes to E3. It's like this other thing they also do, and I remember reading how EA and surprisingly EA, right? EA and Sony were like, well, they kind of wanted it to become more fan centric, more about the games, more about the actual gamers than it currently was. And they had another idea of making it more about celebrities, making it more about entertainment, and not really about the gaming. And that's where it all started to go left. Like now you see, like EA doesn't really go to E3.
Right.
EA has their own little thing on Saturday where they do streaming like all day long, and they release their announcements throughout that like 8-hour stream on a Saturday, and they yeah, but it's all fan centric, really pretty much what they said they wanted to do. And now Sony no longer goes, so it kind of like what you're saying really tracks with how that article described the situation at the ESA, and it seems like it's just like, well, without the voice of Sony and EA saying, hey, look, I mean, they already kind of played their card. We don't like this. Okay, now we're not going. And now they're still going forward with it. That just kind of seems like, yeah, this isn't going to be like, I know you guys are heading out there, and I think you guys are going to have a great time regardless. You guys are going to have fun. You're going to get drunk. You're going to do all kinds of stuff, right? But I kind of feel bad because it's not what if it's not what you guys expected to be. I do feel kind of sad about that because
they're going to get the first inaugural of what the hell. It's going to be cool,
right? Yeah,
yeah. Like my first E3 experience is going to be like, yeah. So this is what E3 was like. It's not, it was like the turning point. But to Slow-Mo's point, you're talking about Slow-Mo, kind of the kind of what the friction, if you will, between the ESA and publishers. And then the messaging about this year's E3, that kind of goes back to what our resident BRAP Sony retail rep, Jeremy, said. If you remember that, Forte, where I think he hinted that Sony wasn't really necessarily on board with the direction that the show was going.
That was a part of their statement. No, that was absolutely a part of their statement.
Yeah. So
one of the other things that I've accidentally stumbled into in virtual legality is I parse corporate messaging quite a lot because I often draft it. So when Sony put out that statement, there's very specific words that they used, and I think their statement was to Game Industry Biz, I want to say, and they used a couple of words where I had a video about it, but basically I said, this half of the sentence doesn't need to exist. It is only designed to essentially shoot across the bow of the ESA. This is how corporations fight. This is how Sony looks bitchy. It will never look any different than this. And so they were absolutely saying, we do not agree with what the ESA is doing in the only way that corporations can, with, subtweets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny because it's not like the ESA didn't already know they didn't agree, but they made it public. It's kind of like how like you see a sports team and they always have like that mindset of like, yeah, we may have issues, but we keep it all in house. We don't talk to the press about it. But then as soon as someone goes public with it in an interview or a post-game press conference after they lost like their 5th game in a row, now it's like, okay, the gloves are off.
Yeah, and the ESA responded with corporate gobbledygook, and I'm familiar with the language, but it was nonsense. It was almost impossible to parse, and that's what I read for a living.
That's what I was about to ask you. I'm like, could you translate that? Because when I read it, I was just like, okay. Like,
I did actually. It was in my video. Yeah, you should check it out. But it took me a while too. I was reading those sentences. They talk about activations and brands in very weird ways. And it was such a nice dichotomy, really, because it's hard to sometimes illustrate these differences of opinions or philosophy. And you have Sony coming out very plainly saying, we want to be this thing focused on gamers. We're going to have all these 150 things that we're going to do, probably in Best Buys or whatever across the country. And they're going to be focused on gamers. And then the ESA doesn't even say Sony's name. They announce it as a response to Sony. And then they just talk about how happy everybody is with the brand activations. And it's like, are you a robot? What is happening?
It's almost as if that statement was actually written by a robot. Yeah.
No, it absolutely did. I think I described it on my tweets as...
they asked Siri to respond.
Yeah, a statement that was translated in boardroom.
That's hilarious.
I want to be activated. I want to go to B Money real quick, because B, you've been to a couple E3s. What do you think's happening to E3, B? Like, what are your thoughts on this, man? Like, do you think it's going to be more of a, maybe not gamer centric per se, but maybe like, I don't know, some kind of entertainment type thing, where that's the gaming is kind of the focus, but not?
I don't know if you guys remember this, but last year, like right when E3 ended, they kind of like announced that the next E3 would be sort of like a festival.
Yeah.
And like as soon as I saw that, like I instantly just thought of like, when Ubisoft has like the Just Dance presentation, and they bring out like a million different stuffed animals dancing around and shit.
Dancing Bears, the new E3.
That's basically what I felt like they were doing. You know what I mean? Like,
oh God,
could you imagine?
When you announce that you're turning it into a festival, you know what I mean, and all these celebrities are supposed to be there, and you know what I mean, these different influencers and stuff. Like, you're just putting on a show for them. You know what I mean? It's at that point, it's not really about the games. At the end of the day, you know what I mean? It's not. You're not saying that you're bringing in, you know what I mean, new publishers, new developers, you know what I mean, or saying that you're highlighting smaller developers and, you know what I mean, opening up the extra space to them. You're saying that you're bringing in more entertainment people, and that's not what people go to E3 for. So I've always felt like, over the past couple of years, it was kind of trending down as more and more, publishers and developers kind of pull it out. And, you go into these halls and the first couple of E3s I went to, like every part of the hall was filled out. The floor plan was completely filled. It was wall-to-wall games, indie developers in there, VR developers in there, you know what I mean? Just developers trying new stuff in the gaming space. And, you know what I mean? The last one I went to, like, it was filled with basically nothing. You know what I mean? A large part of the hall, the one hall was, just completely empty. And that's a hall where most third parties were at, where Ubisoft and Activision and 2K are at. The indie developers weren't there. A lot of the big third party publishers just weren't there. So you could see that it was starting to trend in a way to where people or developers just were feeling like it wasn't the best use of their time or money. You know what I mean? So they definitely weren't getting, what they thought they would get out of it. So it's interesting that it's trending this way, and it's kind of a disappointment, you know what I mean, to kind of get excited about this year, because we're going into a year where new consoles are coming out and things like that. So this should be like a super big year, and you know what I mean, people are looking forward to some of the biggest announcements and things like that. But it's like, how can you really get hyped for E3 when some of the biggest names aren't going to be there anymore?
Well, I said a while ago that, like, and when we had a really interesting and long discussion about this a couple of years ago, but I said it, I like, especially these big platform holders like Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, you don't really need E3. You don't need to hold everything off into E3. You're big enough where and especially in the age of social media and the internet, where you can just go live, do your own show, and probably save yourself a lot of money not having to have to bring everyone and everything all to one location in LA. You could actually like pre-record something if you want to, like the way Nintendo does directs, or you could just have your own show wherever you feel like having it, or wherever your fans are going to be like the most appreciative of it, and like own your own narrative. Do it whenever you need to do it, and that would be just as effective or more effective, depending on when you do it and how you do it, than having to hold everything off to E3, or having to get your developers, hey, look, that vertical slice, I really need that ready by June, okay? So like, do what you gotta do to get it ready. Like, no, you get it ready whenever you need to, and we'll go set this up when you are ready to get that done. That seems like a lot, like a shift that was waiting to happen at some point. That I think that is something that we're definitely seeing now. And also, when you guys are talking about how the way the festival, the way everything is described, it doesn't seem like they're caring really too much about gamers coming to this, right?
Slow-mo, somebody in the live chat called it Gameroo, comparing it to Bonnaroo. I was just like, oh my God, I hope it's not like Bonnaroo. I mean, that's not what I want to go to.
That's funny. But,
You don't want to be Fire Island is your problem.
I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, they want celebrities there. They want it to be a big spectacle, but not really about the game. Sounds to me like they don't really care about gamers coming to this. What if we start seeing huge concerts? What if they invite like pop stars like Ariana Grande to go perform somewhere? Now it's more about like, yeah, you don't want to see that, but it's like, 500 million like teenage girls that would like love to go see that. So then now it's
well, you got to kind of think about it in two ways. When it came to this situation with the attendance and stuff, I think they do want gamers to come to this, but the experience of watching E3 at home is way better enjoyment when it comes to actually picking through what you want to actually see. You don't have to deal with the crowds and stuff, and you don't have to deal with all the in-between intermissions. Everything pretty much is positive to you, and most people will tell you if you want to watch E3 for the games, watching it at home is probably the best way to do it. So how do you get people to come to a venue? You throw different things at them. You entice them to want to come for like the concert, see the celebrities and stuff like that. That's kind of the wrong way that you should be looking at it, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to entice people by all the attractions you can have there, but then it's starting, all of the different publishers and developers aren't seeing any they're not seeing anything from that. They're basically saying you're basically watering down the experience. You're making it harder for media to actually get into these venues, to actually talk to these developers, the things that we need to know the most about, and you're crowding up the games, and people can't even play the games because you've got so many people here that are just here to do that. So they kind of try to do both, but they failed at both at the same time. So I understand why they did it, but it's just not they didn't come up with the right strategy. The fact that people were walking, like, I remember, did you go the first year they did that, B Money?
Were
you there the year that they opened it up to the public for the first year?
Yeah, I was there.
And then I remember you say something like it was like the worst experience ever walking through the hall because you couldn't do anything.
You couldn't do nothing at all.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything.
I think B said people had BO too.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you get to go to E3 and you get a media badge, what I mean? Now you have all these people who are, just regular YouTubers, what I mean, trying to get spots, to get content and stuff like that. It was a very difficult experience, what I mean, trying to navigate through the different halls and go to different locations where these developers were set up and you had meeting times and things like that.
Yeah.
It just was not an enjoyable experience at all. And at that time, it was a limited amount of people who were allowed to come in, from the public. And I think they've actually expanded it since then.
They did expand it since then.
I'm going to go to the live chat real quick. Simon Bragg said, did Keighley bot wheel out celebrities and Green Day at the Game Awards, though?
That is true. But it still was, the focus was on the games. And I think even Green Day were performing a song that was in a game. So
the other thing too, Slow-Mo, is that this is an award show that he's talking about, that Keighley put on, where E3 is an actual trade show. So there's a difference there.
Yeah, big difference there.
Difference there.
Yeah. So, this thing's fascinating. I mean, again, I hope it's not like Bonnaroo. That's there's.
He said it's a waste of my money if I go.
I'm telling you, man. If it's, I'm gonna have a good time regardless anyway because of the people that are going. Right. I mean,
that's the only reason.
So I'm not worried about that. And
same here.
yeah. So I mean, if we have to, we'll do the. I don't know what we'll do, but if there's dancing bears there, I don't know if I'll be happy about that. But
well, don't go to the Ubisoft show because how that's going to open. It's going to open with a dancing panda.
It's the highlight of the show. Never miss it.
I gotta go to that one just because my daughter loves Just Dance, so I gotta get a video of the dancing bear on the stage.
It's the only press conference that has dancing stuffed animals and then drops like 15 F-bombs randomly throughout their presentation.
Yes, this is true.
Right.
Especially if our girls on the stage, it's gonna be a wrap.
It literally is the same show every year. They do open up with a Just Dance, montage dance thing, and there's like a panda twerking on stage, and then and then like right after that, there's like a rock band. Some aging rock star comes out and starts screaming at everyone, and they're like, it's like Rage 3 or I don't know, like some other like it's Doom or it's some first person shooter where like limbs are being torn, left and right, and it's just like I feel like I've seen this show before, but okay.
Oh my goodness.
Bring
I will
Aisha
say,
Tyler back.
yes, bring her back.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
To me, I think the biggest blow was obviously Sony not going, and I know there's a lot of controversy behind that, but I think the one thing Sony's probably going to do is show that you really don't need E3.
They already showed that.
Well, yeah, they have. I mean, I think with the advent of social media, and I don't know what your opinion on this is, Hoeg, but I don't think Sony. I think Sony's going to further prove that you don't need E3. You could in a year of a console launch of all times, right?
I mean, it's always a counterfactual, right?
Yes.
They're gonna go without E3.
Yep.
They're gonna do just fine selling their PlayStation 5. Would they have done better with the presentation at E3? We can't peer into the multiverse, so it's hard to say.
Right.
But I think the fact that they are going to do just fine, I don't think anybody has any doubt about that. PlayStation 4 being the success that it is, PlayStation 5 is going to be a success. I think everybody's still wondering exactly what it looks like and what it costs and what it does. But they're going to have their own presentation. They had their own presentation in 2013. It was in February of 2013. I would have expected the PlayStation 5 presentation in February of this year. It doesn't look like it's going to be February. So, I mean, there's still open questions about exactly what their plans are. But do they need E3? No. As some people have said, Microsoft and EA aren't technically at E3. You could be near E3. Nintendo gets away with a Direct and a Treehouse live stream. Mm-hmm. I would expect Sony to do what do they call them? State of play in Sony's world. Not that they look identical to Directs. I get confused. They have their state of play, and they'll have a big blowout for the PlayStation 5, and that information will be in everybody's hands that would have gotten it at E3. I personally like the extravaganza of E3. I like watching, my favorite podcasts and video people go and explore for a week and bring back all this wonderful content and overload on it for 10 days and be able to watch it for the rest of the summer because I can't possibly keep up with everything that everybody's making. But do these game companies actually become advantaged by that? I don't think so. Not the big ones. And I think if there is any kind of harm to not having the E3s that we had before, it's going to be the mid-range and the smaller developers that kind of might get lost in the weeds a little bit more. And you won't realize that as the problem for essentially 3 or 4 years after it happens. And then maybe you have a corrective action after that. So I don't think Sony needs it. I think Sony's going to be just fine. Would they be better with E3? Maybe a different kind of E3 than ESA is planning to offer? ? We don't know what that's going to be. So did they make a good choice? We'll probably be able to better answer that question in about middle of June.
The funny thing is Sony has so much stuff still happening this year. I mean, they got their biggest game probably in their franchise in Last of Us releasing a week and a half before E3. May.
Yeah, it's the end of May now, right? If it doesn't get delayed again.
So you're talking about probably the biggest franchise they have coming out right before E3, and people are going to probably be loving the hell out of that game. And Sony isn't going to be there, but technically, all they got to do is do an update probably around the middle of June, probably right after E3, talk about how the sales of that game was, maybe talk about it at the end of June, and then what happens? Then they give you information on PS5 and say, and guess what? If you didn't get enough of this game, you can play it on your PS5, and it's going to be this, and they can show gameplay of what that game looks like on PS5, along with everything else. I just think they have so much. People want so much information from Sony right now, and they really don't have to talk about it because they still are selling games for PS4 right now. You know, I would be more worried about what Sony's doing and not doing if they didn't have anything in the hopper over the next 5 to 6 months. If we were coming up to E3 and there was no Final Fantasy VII coming out on that system, and there was no Last of Us, and there's no Ghost of Tsushima coming out right around the launch of the PS5, I would probably be a little more worried. But they got so much stuff that they can key in on. They have enough content to make it to the end. Gamers just we're gamers. We want to know what the new system is. Everybody wants to know what the box is.
Right.
We got a budget for that crap.
They got a budget for it. and the biggest thing is people are just impatient right now, and I get that because I want to know that information too. I want to pre-order it so I can already get this thing paid for. But I just think as of right now, we just got to be patient with it and just hope that we get some type of news sooner rather than later at this point, because I think the whole narrative about them waiting for Xbox to release a date and a price, I mean, it's starting to look more real the closer we get to it, especially if this whole February thing does not pan out, which at this moment it doesn't look like.
It would surprise me if they were going to set up a whole thing. And what do we got left? We got 17 days left in the month. Right. I can't imagine they're aimed at February right now. Could be wrong, but I can't imagine that they are. No, I think that's absolutely right. I wouldn't characterize my sentiment as worry as much as, one of the things you see online a lot, and maybe this just comes from my closeness to how companies think, is that, Corporation X has all this research, they have all these plans, and they know what they're doing. And you know what? Sometimes absolutely they do. But what's always important to remember is every company, no matter how international and how many billions of dollars it makes, is made up of human beings. And human beings can just get it wrong. If they have 35,000 pages of market research, you can still just get it wrong. And that's not disparaging them. It's just we don't have anything to react to at all about what this thing looks like. And I think once Microsoft comes out and says, we're not going to have exclusives for a while, that's not our plan anymore, the generational transition already starts to feel really weird, right? I mean, like that Xbox Series X is, I want it because I like stronger boxes under my TV, but that's it. That's what it is. I could otherwise play the games on the rest of my stuff. And Sony, could you please come out and, even if it's Battle Arena Toshinden PS5 version, whatever the hell you've got.
I haven't thought about that game in forever.
Let's do it.
It's my deep cuts, is that you throw that on PlayStation, something to react to, where I can say, okay, we can at least start to formulate that in our heads, that this is what my October, November, December, whatever is going to look like. And it's going to cost this much, and I need to make sure to get that many more clients in October and figure this whole thing out. And we can't react to that. So I don't know that I'm worried, except that I still have that small amount of concern of I can't even kind of start to formulate whether I think you've made any mistakes or not, or whether everything's all great, because it's a literal void. And I still do remember the PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 transition, not solid. And so I think that's still kind of in the back of some people's heads, maybe just the oldies like me, where you say, the last time PlayStation was on the top of the earth, they kind of tripped a little making the transition. So I'd like to feel really good and confident and calm about that transition. And it's impossible to do that right now because we don't know what we're looking at.
That's true. And, something I've thought about or I've had discussions with people about is it could simply come down to the fact that they do still have games that are releasing this year, pretty big titles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't want to, really have that cannibalized by really, too much information on the PS5 just yet. So I kind of have the feeling that as they get closer to some of these release dates on the bigger titles, then you'll start to get more information on that.
Yeah, I would hope so. You mentioned the end of May, Last of Us 2 is going to come out. If it does come out, we have to get a little bit closer for me to really lock that in as actually happening.
Yeah, but now we get like post E3, we get into like August, and there's still nothing being said. And he's like, wait, what's going on?
I'm planning on being depressed. You say we're all having a good time. Last of Us Part 2 is going to depress the shit out of me for like a month. So I already know what that game is going to do. E3 is going to be a somber, sad party because of whatever the heck Naughty Dog decided to put me through with Ellie and Joel.
I agree 100%.
But it is kind of funny, like how people keep going on about who's going to be at E3, who's not at E3, and E3 is a tradition, and it's how it's always been. And you talk the big consoles and this and that, but then depending on who you talk to, you say, well, what big games are going to be shown on these consoles that are going to show that the next generation arrived? Well, generations are over now. That's gone. That tradition's gone. And it's like, wait a minute, either we have tradition or we don't have tradition. Which one is it?
Well, it's definitely gone for Microsoft. I mean, they're really moving to an Apple model. It looks like things are going to function, and then there's going to be a sticker on the box that says you can't play it before the Xbox One X. Like the One won't play it anymore, and they'll just start kind of delineating what can play these things. Would be my guess. Sony's still sticking with their 5, but I think the rumors are, and I would really love to have it confirmed, is that it's going to be backward compatible to some extent with most of the stuff. And so, yeah, I think Sony's going to continue to run generational stuff. I suspect they have at least some kind of tech demo stuff that they're prepping for, what a God of War 2 might look like on that system, what Spider-Man 2. I mean, Spider-Man sold just a jillion copies. So I think that they're probably going to show what Spider-Man 2 looks like. The stuff that you did see in the Wired articles had them talking about load times and things like that. One of the things that's going to happen in this generation is that it's not going to be, at least at the outset, very spectacular, right? I mean, they're already prepping the ground for that. Sony has talked about load times and things like that because it's not going to be patently obvious that this thing is brand new and only possible on the PlayStation 5, would be my guess. I mean, you'll see things that are shinier and you say, well, the 4 would really struggle with that. But it's certainly not going to be 3D to 2D. I mean, that'll never happen again.
Oh, we'll never have that experience again.
Yeah, and it might not even be like 3 to 2. I think 3 to 2 is the high definition jumps were pretty good too.
Yeah.
This is going to be incremental, and it's very hard to sell somebody on your load times are a half second instead of 6 seconds, which is great, right? And that's going to actually affect design in certain levels, and that's going to be awesome. But that's harder to be like, look at the shiny screenshot. And so they've got a harder job to do, and they might be taking their time based on that. You did see the statements from Sony saying, we're going to, we're in the catbird seat. We're going to see what Xbox and Microsoft wants to do with their price. And so we're playing chicken, and Microsoft's thinking the same thing because 2013 really turned on the fact that Sony went second, and Sony really leveraged the crap out of that to get a lot of momentum off the launch. So they're playing a little bit of chicken. I did a video about, one concern that I have is Chinese manufacturing capability is not great right now, and we don't know what it's going to look like. So, is there going to be a delay? I don't think these companies are likely to delay their launches, but I have no doubt in my mind they're going to be more supply constrained than either side would want.
Yeah.
So, get the pre-orders when you got them.
Get your pre-orders while you can.
Yeah.
Yep. Get your Lysol ready.
So, yeah.
Oh man.
So me and Enrique, we talked about this yesterday about this being that generation that they, it's the one you wanted to win and you definitely didn't want to lose. What do you think about Sony coming out saying, CEO comes out saying we want to move as much of this 109 million player base to the PS5 as fast as possible? And what can Microsoft or Xbox actually do to make a dent in that number? Like, what are some things you think needs to happen over the course of the next 7 to 8 months for that to be something they can actually deal with?
Well, I mean, I think Microsoft might be moving more towards a companion model rather than a strict substitute. I think, some of the quotes that you saw from Microsoft earlier, either this week or last week, they all blend together, that they don't view Sony and Nintendo as competitors. Now, some of that's bluster, right? Everybody, says these kinds of things. But I think in a realistic way, Microsoft starts to say, okay, Sony's got the console space. We're going to continue to have a console because that's a good entry point. That's a good foot in the door. But, we don't really care if Rick has a PlayStation 5 as long as he has Game Pass and he's playing our stuff somewhere, not on the dollar deal, whenever the real price is. But that's what we want to have happen. And so, yeah, they want to win, but they want the industry to overall grow the pie, and they want to have that SaaS revenue model. Remember, one of the things that happened is that I think Sony's cloud infrastructure is going through Azure now.
Yes.
In the next generation.
Yes.
So, yeah, they're competitors. They're also cooperative. And I think Microsoft is aimed at the right thing, which is that a bigger pie for all is a bigger pie for us. And that's not strictly competitive. You get into a lot of weird strategies here. So I think Sony wants to move people over. They absolutely do. You know, one of their problems is actually pretty funny, which is they have to advertise that backwards compatibility because they do have these big launches this year. And you don't want to actually put your PlayStation 4 base on an island to say, well, I'm not leaving until I beat Tsushima because it's over here. And I know as soon as I unplug this PlayStation 4, it's going to get lost because it happened to me in previous generations. I never beat Final Fantasy 12 because it was at the end of the PlayStation 2 era. So, you know, it's one of those kinds of things where you have to balance these different factors. And I think Sony wants to have a friction-free or at least low-friction transition point over to the 5. Probably that consists of what they consider to be a reasonable price point and an advertisement of backwards compatibility. You throw on some kind of CPU, GPU, easy enhancements that you could say, hey, not only that, but Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima are rigged to do X, Y, and Z on this new system out of the box. Look at the ray tracing on Ellie's head or whatever the hell they've got.
Tracing on her head. Oh my
yeah,
God.
And then they say, so come on over. This game you've already been playing is better, as you said earlier in the podcast, and it's going to be $450 or something that sounds not awful, right? You know, people are buying Switches at $350. We bring this in at a slightly higher price point, and everybody's a winner. So, I mean, I think that's what they're going to do. What can Xbox do? They can continue to market the crap out of the Game Pass. The Xbox Series X is kind of, I would say it sells itself insofar as it is what it is. It's a more powerful Xbox. It's advertised strictly as that. It's going to play all your One games. There aren't going to be games for 2 years that aren't playable on your One. So if you want a stronger box, if you want a better experience, that's what you get. But the sales pitch is trickier. It's much trickier than just the Games Pass sales pitch. So they're taking a different course. They're going out into the wilderness. And I hope they are successful because I think it would be good to have a different model work out.
So that's a great point. And I remember Sony saying, their goal is to really, I think, move or get as many people into the PlayStation 5 as soon as possible at launch.
That is exactly what they said.
Yeah, so I think that would, well, I think, like you said, Hoeg, I mean, they don't want to leave people on an island, and if you take your PS4 games with you, you're not going to lose them by going to the PS5. That's one way, I think, to kind of entice people.
Yeah, and if you show that people who bought digitally get to bring the account straight over and they work right out, you just download them and they're in. I mean, you start to advocate for not only your PlayStation 5, but, oh, by the way, if you were buying physical, you should probably be buying digital. This is what Sony would like because it locks you into the ecosystem even more.
Yes.
And then if you do that, look at all the things that you get, the goodies that you get coming over to the 5. It's just super easy. And you hit this toggle for whatever their PlayStation 4 currently has, super mode, whatever it has on its backwards compatibility. And we can do that right out of the box. You get a little bit extra loading time. You get a little bit more whatever we can do without actually having to, change the code underlying the games. And it can happen day one. It's just stronger. Yeah. And that's the sales pitch. Xbox Series X has a similar sales pitch, but they're definitely not going to have any exclusives. So what are they going to show? I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're going to show Halo Infinite's going to think it'd be a big game for them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works. You also don't want to ostracize if you're Xbox, your One, and not your One X, your One users. I mean, that's the one that's really tricky for me because the One is just so underpowered even against the 4 that it's like you're telling me that for 2 years your games that you're going to sell on the Series X have to operate on the One. And it's like, okay, that might be a constraint. I don't know. We'll see.
Scalability.
You can do a lot with low settings. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean,
is that low settings though? That's like basement settings.
People blow up. It's going to be like on the news,
mobile
a house
version.
fire.
Yeah, when Master Chief looks like Mario from Super Mario Brothers on the NES,
Yeah, it all switches to just a turn-based tactics game with just bobbleheads.
It's like Age of Empires.
Yeah. No, but so I think that's an open question. Now, one of the things I've said that's a little bit counterintuitive that I really liked when the transition happened to the PlayStation 4 was I actually liked the cross-platform games because I tend to like solid frame rate. And those kinds of enhancements over just the raw, like what you put on the screen. I like that solidity. And like, I remember playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag and being super thrilled with it on the PlayStation 4 because there weren't any hiccups at all because it was built to run on the 3. And it didn't necessarily look like the games we get now, but it was absolutely solid. And I actually loved that. So one thing that I'm looking forward to in the X is if you do have to make it run on these kinds of worse systems, I expect maybe I won't get the graphics that I otherwise could out of that box, but I'll get a very solid, maybe 60 frames per second experience that I wouldn't ordinarily get because developers like to put the shinies on the screen.
That's it.
That's what I think the biggest change is going to be when they came out and said that they're, going to support the original Xbox for at least the first 2 years. I was just looking like, okay, guys, we're going to get 60 frames per second.
Give me the frames,
and 1440p probably at the highest on some of these higher end games like Halo. Well, they already confirmed that Halo, I think, is going to be 4K. But 60 frames per second is going to be the normative if you want the newer system. And I think that's the one thing that everybody should really double down on. I don't really care if they can't crank up the anti-aliasing. They can't give me the beautiful textures, the 4K textures. As long as I got 60 frames per second, if they want to go a little further, give me a field of view slider, and hopefully they can get that ultra-wide support that NVIDIA and AMD been talking to Microsoft about. If you can get some of those things,
you guys with your ultra wide screens.
Oh man, I can't.
I'm old school here.
I can't.
Oh my God, those
16 by 9, man. I see that at work every day.
Those ultra wide screens are so sexy. Big shout out to Ains from Season Gaming. He just posted one in the DM, and I'm just like, I feel like a PC peasant right now.
What did he post? Which DM did he post it in?
In the E3 DM.
Oh God, let me look at this.
Oh, you gotta see.
And I opened talking about my old Macintosh. I just like that they're in color right now, guys. I mean, come on.
But no, I kind of feel like the only real hindrance that we'll see to these games is that like they're designed to work on the older consoles. So so that there's a 1-to-1 look. So like if you ran both games side by side, the same content is on the screen for both. They have to make sure it's like that so that the people who are playing on like a base Xbox One don't complain that, man, I don't get to see like that many enemies on screen, or like I don't get all the in Halo Infinite, like there aren't 30 Covenant ships in the sky. It's just 3, so it's like, because it's not like that people won't have anything to complain about. So, but as far as resolutions go, it's going to run how everything else runs on a base Xbox One. It's going to be barely hitting 30 frames per second. It's going to be barely getting 1080p, if that. And as far as all those extra graphical settings that like Forte was talking about, like just don't even think about it. That's not even in the cards for you. Yeah. But
Hoeg, I gotta ask you, man, how much more time do we have with you?
So I've got an early morning meeting. I'm 10:45, let's say.
All right. Let's go. Okay, so I want to quickly go through, because I think this kind of ties into your expertise too. I've heard you talk about mergers, acquisitions.
It's what I do.
Sony paid big bucks for Insomniac Games, $229 million.
Oh, they got a sale on Insomniac.
No, they did.
I said big bucks, but because $229 million is still
big discount.
But do you? So you're saying this is a discount then?
Freaking EA spent $431 million on Vince Zampella, for Pete's sake. Come on. No, I'm sorry. I'm down. I'm being down on Respawn just because they've never impressed me with anything they've ever made. I like.
That's a
like
spicy take there, Hoeg.
See, I like to drop those in. We could talk about Jedi at some point if you want. It's not true. I like Titanfall just fine. They're an average studio.
Which, by the way, I like
that's kind of tough.
Spicy.
Hey, Hoeg, I was kind of rocking with you on your take on ILP on Fallen Order, but we'll get into that another time.
Yeah, hey, that's absolutely fine. No. In all honesty, I look at this. There's a couple things that happen here, right? I like to compare it to the Titanfall deal because that was more than $400 million if they hit their incentives. There have been reports that they did hit those incentives. Obviously, they did. Apex would have been what those incentives were based on, and it launched out of the gate. They would have made all that money. So they bought Respawn for $400+ million. Insomniac has been working with and around Sony for forever. My brother worked at Insomniac. He worked on Ratchet and Clank, Crack in Time, and what was going to be eventually Fuse before it was changed over into Activision Fuse or whatever the hell they did to it. But Insomniac being sold for 200 some odd million, 26, I want to say. One of the things to note is that it's mostly cash, I believe was what was reported. And cash to the seller, Insomniac in this case, is more valuable in hand than equity. So the folks that sold Respawn took a big investment in Electronic Arts as part of their sales price. And that gets counted in as the value of whatever that is for a publicly traded company as part of what you sold your company for. But you're locked into that until certain things happen and you get it vested and all this other stuff. So cash is important. But outside of that, just looking at this from afar, this looked to me very much like a situation where Ted Price was ready to liquidate, where he had a successful game with Spider-Man. Sony clearly loved that. Who wouldn't love selling that many millions of copies of that game? Sony loved it. Insomniac has been forever talking about how much independence mattered to it. That was Ted Price's, absolute motto. And full disclosure, I actually got to meet Ted Price when my brother worked there. So, we shook hands is the extent of our conversation. But that has been his motto, and this looks like it was just the right time. And you see this a lot. You see founders of companies say, it's time for me to cash out. He's obviously still there. He's still doing the job. It's time for me to go get what had to have been many, many, many millions of dollars personally in your bank account rather than just have that equity build up. And so I think what you've got is a situation where he was comfortable with Sony. Sony really wanted Insomniac. You've got a bit of a kind of targeted buyout war between the companies right now because Microsoft is on the warpath to try to get that bricks and mortar in their Game Pass service. And I think Sony wanted to lock them up, put a ring on it with Insomniac Games. And so you got a little bit of a willing bidder to actually pay a lot of cash. And you had a founder that was ready to cash out. And that leads to, them making Spider-Man's 2 through 10 or whatever they're going to do for the next 20 years.
Look, man, they cashed out. I mean, strike while the iron's hot. I mean, you ain't gonna be. Your company probably won't be bigger than what it is at the moment that Spider-Man came out.
I think Spider-Man was their biggest selling game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it was
massive. It was the biggest selling exclusive game for this generation for Sony.
They could have peeled off like 5% of what they made off of Spider-Man and used that towards what they used to acquire.
Well, that's
Insomniac.
Right. Like gross revenues from Spider-Man alone had to be, $800+ million. So
Jesus.
And they're going to share that. They're going to share that with Marvel. I mean, that's not the end of the story. There's a lot of sharing of that number, but it was clearly worth what Insomniac can do. Yes. And so Insomniac said, absolutely. And I'm only joking about Respawn because you look at EA bought Respawn, essentially with one game in the kitty and
Titanfall.
Titanfall, which did fine. And they bought them for $400 million. Now there were a bunch of earnouts there, and I actually did an analysis piece for the Easy Allies when that purchase happened that talked about how earnouts work and how it's not all cash and all this stuff. But it's much more money than much longer lived Insomniac. And so, I look at it and I say, it's a bit of a deal. You got a little bit of a hometown discount because Ted likes you.
Yeah, that's. I don't think anyone was shocked by that purchase, given the history between those two companies.
Not by the buyer. I was shocked that they sold out at all. I mean, honestly, Insomniac was so staunch about it. I was not expecting them to be on the list.
Yeah, that was surprising too. Yeah, that definitely was.
I always tell people everybody has a number.
Is somebody giving the signs to the Astros in the background?
We're not stealing signs here. So Hoeg, let me ask you one more question regarding this topic.
Sure.
Like, how long does a deal like this take to get to put together? I mean, is this like a long-winded type thing, or is it just?
Yeah. So when you buy and sell a company, there's a couple steps that you take. One is you have a lunch, you have a dinner, whatever. You say, would you be willing to sell your company? And after that point in time, you spend some time actually developing what the economics of the deal are going to look like. This isn't the lawyers. This is, okay, how is this going to work? Am I going to sell you all my stock? Is the company going to instead sell assets? You talk to accountants and tax folks to decide what the structure is going to be that makes the most sense for buyer and seller. And you come up with what we call a term sheet, which is all those high-level items. Like, we wouldn't have a deal unless this number is 226 and those kinds of things, because, as you can guess, you're going to document a lot of this. It's going to take hundreds and hundreds of pages of lawyer work. Honest to God, it will. And you don't want to go through that process until the sides at least have the basics of the deal lined up. So we're going to have these things that are sold to us. You're going to make these promises about the company. You're going to make these commitments after the company is sold. You're going to enter into this contract to do X. You're going to do all these other things. And then we're going to agree on those terms. And maybe afterwards, or maybe during that process, we're going to do what we call due diligence. Now, these companies are close, so maybe it was a shortened process. But generally, that means that the buyer goes out, hires lawyers, hires financial auditors, all these other people, and goes through the company and looks at exactly what the company is, so that we can set the price to make sure that everybody's happy with and understands what's happening. And that can be an arduous process, especially for a company like Insomniac that has a lot of people moving in and out, that is a big enterprise, that has made a lot of money, and that has existed for a long time. That's a lot of contracts. That's a lot of reporting and a lot of paperwork to go through. So that due diligence process then takes months, many months. And after the term sheet kind of gets to a place where you're in agreement in general about what you're selling and what you're getting paid for it and those kinds of things, that gets signed up. And what that term sheet says is, you promise that you will be exclusive to us for a period that we think it'll take to document this thing, which might be 3 to 6 months. And then we hand it over to the lawyers to start drafting the asset purchase agreement or the stock purchase agreement. And then the multiple number of agreements that go with all that stuff, and to go through the diligence. I will tell you that I just closed a deal on February 5th, and I think it started last April.
Wow.
To kind of give the context here, it is a long, long process. Once the term sheet is signed, you've got a general kind of agreement in principle, but things can happen because that due diligence process might find a dead body in the closet, and there's no good way around it. Generally speaking, once you've agreed to sell, the buyer can say, okay, that dead body is going to cost us $5 million to fix, so we're going to drop your price $5 million. You both agree, and then you press on. But there are some things where it's like, oh, God, I don't want to buy that. That litigation is unlimited liability, and what's ever going to happen to it once that settles, come back and we'll talk about buying you. Those kinds of things can pop up. So you go through that whole process, and then you get to closing many, many, many months later. And mergers and acquisitions, the reason I label that as one of the things that I do is that is, a moneymaker. It takes a lot of legal services. It takes a lot of legal expertise, and negotiating those contracts is, literally half of my book of business. I mean, you're talking about documentation that is hundreds of thousands of words when every word matters and can come back to sue you after the thing is done.
Wow.
Now, when you said that the term letter, is that the letter of intent that we've seen out there a couple times?
That's another name for a term sheet, is a letter of intent. Yes, those are the same document.
Okay. And so on average, after the letter of intent has been delivered, like how long does it generally go until you see these two companies announce, hey, we just acquired so-and-so?
Depends on how big they are. For something like Sony buying Insomniac, I'm going to call this a mid-sized deal, if you can believe it. But, it's not AT&T and Time Warner. It's not to go through an antitrust approval. Yeah, it's T-Mobile and Sprint. Where you saw with T-Mobile and Sprint, one of the things that would have been a part of their document was, we need to go get approval, right? That if it's big enough, the government actually gets to say that it's okay. And so that becomes a provision in the document that you say, okay, we can all agree to this. We can even sign it up, but we all sit in our hands until the government approves, and they can take a while. I don't know if you're familiar with government things. They can take
we just saw that with T-Mobile and Sprint. That took it seems to be like took forever.
And you might remember
that's because they shut it down at one point. The government said no at one point.
Yeah. Well, and you might remember the Disney Fox merger. When you get into these billions of dollar deals, you've got a lot of stuff. You got a lot of things working. But when they sign the term sheet is going to say essentially you're going to be exclusive until date X, which will be 3 to 6 months down the line. And we're immediately going to ask the lawyers to start drafting, and we'll get this closed as soon as practical. And they start drafting. And generally speaking, the lawyers take a couple weeks to turn the first version of the drafts. And then the other side bounces. And, I think the last deal that I did finished on version 23, something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, it's a process. It's a process, but it's important because you're talking about, you get a comma wrong and it's $6 million. So you got to pay attention and avoid those malpractice suits if you can.
Wow.
I had another question for you. Did you hear there was a rumor very recently, a couple of weeks ago, that Microsoft was in talks with Platinum Games to acquire them? Did you hear anything like that at all in recently?
Not from anybody specific. I did see it floating around when people were talking about the fact that Platinum took the Tencent money. Mm-hmm. And that before that, Microsoft was a possibility for them to essentially financially stabilize their studio. And I think this was in reference to the fact that they were otherwise happy with the Tencent money and the freedom that it afforded to them. But I don't have any greater insight there other than to say I don't think Microsoft's done with his acquisition stretch. And so, I'd keep my eye on that. I think they probably got 2 or 3 more companies in them.
To kind of expound on this whole Tencent thing, because I made a joke a couple of weeks ago, and I was just joking for the most part, but I kind of look at Tencent kind of like a almost like a mafia level kind of thing, because they seem to be just giving money to people, very, very frequently. Them and NetEase, they seem to just like, oh, you need some funds to keep the lights on. Here you go. I'm your buddy. But then, later on, when you're back in the same situation, now they want percentages of your company. Now they want, a little bit more. It's like they kind of will you in, and the next thing you know, they own you. Maybe I'm watched too many mafia movies or something, but it just seems like Tencent has their eye on them in more ways than one. I mean, what do you think?
I think Tencent's financial investment side has the same incentives as most financial investors, which is that they like to get relationships going, what we might consider networking, only with networking with big bags of cash. And once they have that relationship, it affords them certain opportunities. One, it lets them see inside the company and see exactly how it operates, whether it would make a good investment target in the future. That's what that foot in the door does. And then, maybe take that opportunity and leverage it if the company gets in trouble or things along those lines. In my view, Tencent isn't operating in any way that I can see that is so different from other strategic and financial investors. I think most of the concern comes from their obvious close relationship and affiliation with the Chinese government, and people rightly being at least cognizant and aware of those relationships. I don't disagree with that at all. I do think the way that Tencent has currently operated, you have to basically believe that they are some kind of Trojan horse, because I don't think that they have done anything specifically problematic right now with the companies that we have seen them invest in. They had a very good opportunity to do some stuff in messing up Epic last year, when especially the Blitzchung stuff was happening. Epic was having issues with China, and Tencent didn't do anything to control Epic's communications. And you could say, oh yeah, they're lulling you into full sense of security. I won't deny. I have no idea what the overall strategic goals of Tencent or the Chinese government through Tencent might be. I can say right now that they aren't doing anything untoward or unusual that I can see from afar.
Gotcha. Okay.
Interesting. It's a very interesting perspective. I mean, it's funny you referred to it as kind of like a mafia slow-mo. Because I mean,
it just seems funnier that
they
way.
have a lot of money. I mean, they're a big player in the industry.
You could say the same thing about venture capitalists in general. Is what I'm saying. And a lot of people don't like venture capitalists, but I have a VC practice, and a lot of them are useful. A lot of them are good, and they offer that money, and they offer some expertise, and they actually do help companies get up and running. And there are a number that are, not as good and maybe a little bit intimidating and mobstery.
VC's not always bad, that's for sure.
VC's not always bad, 100%. But you sometimes struggle with delivering that message online, right? If I'm tweeting with somebody, VCs are the devil. It's like, well, not really. But
no, they're not.
It's an ongoing conversation, and it's the same thing with Tencent. It's like, oh, well, you see Tencent, and you see the Chinese flag, and it is what it is. And look, I understand. I did a freaking 9-part series on how Blizzard kept shooting itself in the foot and then its leg and then its other leg for like 2 solid weeks on this thing. And so I understand how you can get to that point in your mind about feeling this way about Tencent. All I'm saying is it's premature, that I don't see it as problematically as some other people do this second.
Yeah. It's funny, as I think about this conversation we've been having tonight with you, Hoeg, I never thought on this podcast that I would ever hear M&As, KPIs, and VC. Like, I've never crossed my mind.
There you go.
Yeah.
You got it all. I'll be synergizing my core competencies later in the podcast.
And a core competency, that's another one that, I didn't think I would hear this podcast. But I do want to move on to our last topic, and Hoeg, I understand if you have to go now. That's.
I can do 10 more minutes if it works.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we usually go to about 11 o'clock. So if you have to stop at 10 minutes, just let us know.
Oh hell, I can make it till 11. Screw it. I'll just be tired at the meeting. It's fine.
Woo! All right,
Hoeg is living dangerously.
Yes. He wants to talk about that spicy respawn. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I was gonna say I'm in Michigan when the iciness. I'm gonna be on some highway that ices over tomorrow morning.
Don't be dealing with no 59. M59 is terrible that early in the morning.
All right,
there you go.
So this topic's kind of, I think, strikes a chord with Mr. Slow-Mo Backslap, because Slow-Mo, I think you're like the resident guru when it comes to looter shooters, man. I think you tend to be one of the more knowledgeable gamers in the community. I think when it comes to looter shooters, at least in my opinion, because I always ask you about looter shooters. You give me a good in-depth analysis of these things.
I do tend to partake a lot of those activities. Yes.
And sir, I just want to say I thoroughly enjoyed your video on the Division 2, which if you haven't checked Slow-Mo's video out, by the way, I did drop the link to Slow-Mo's channel and Forte's channel in the description below. So please check out those 2 channels if you guys haven't done so already. Please do that.
I appreciate that, bro.
Yeah, and Hoeg, we're gonna drop your channel in there as well.
Cool.
So people can check out your YouTube channel, because I've seen your videos and they're always very insightful. So, but it's interesting. We've joked about Anthem. Anthem's kind of been the butt of our jokes. I think when we did like the end of a year show or something, we talked about our most disappointing game. We all said Anthem.
Yeah, it was unanimous.
Yeah, it wasn't even, there was no even hesitation. Everyone was at the same time. It was like, Anthem. It's Anthem. And so BioWare is officially redesigning Anthem. So the game seasons will be put on hold, essentially so the developer can work on a larger update. I mean, this game, I don't know. This might be the worst game I've seen.
Has the possibility of being the best comeback.
Yes,
ever,
I was going to say thank you.
I think it's budget. Look, I'm not going to bring certain people into this conversation because this is about my feelings. Look, I loved that game when it first released. It was amazing. It was fun. There was nothing like the Iron Man simulator that I've ever played before. But that game wholeheartedly let me down once you get to the end game, and there was just nothing to do.
Yeah.
The game just completely lost all substance once you got that deep into it. Now, I think the one thing that a lot of people need to really look at when they look at EA, I think EA is I hate to say EA's changing. That might not be because of them. It might be because of the stability that Respawn and what they've been doing with their games, and actually showing that you don't have to have all of these different nefarious things in your games to make money. And the fact that they're actually giving BioWare time to fix this game is another thing, because we know Ubisoft is willing to do that. They did it with 2 games already when it comes to Rainbow Six and Division, and they're still fixing Division 2. So we know the blueprint is out there, and I think EA is trying to alleviate yourself even more towards the fans, but this has a chance of being one of the best comebacks if they can, because the game itself in premise is great, and for a game that people didn't even know what they were making at E3 the year they announced it, they was like, what are we making? Completely really made that game in 18 months. And it was actually really good.
Hey, Forte, I'm going to have to, not necessarily disagree. I do agree that there is a possibility this could be a great comeback. I think that they are dealing with some issues that they cannot easily wash away or resolve, right? That say someone like the No Man's Sky team didn't have to deal with. Or say how Massive Entertainment with the Division didn't have to deal with, or Bungie with Destiny. It's the Frostbite engine is problematic, and I know there's some people out there who will champion the Frostbite engine. That's no different than any other game engine in the industry. But when you think about it, they go out Disney right now. He already jumping on me. Don't do it slow mo. Don't talk about Frostbite. But it is what it is. Like when developers come out and say it's the worst engine I've ever worked with, when it was designed to only be used for a battlefield and nothing else. And that's not what BioWare does. They don't make first-person shooters. They make RPGs, and now they've made it a loot shooter. So it's unfortunate that they've had to create a lot of their own tools and try to retool this engine for its use. But when something like Unity or Unreal, fixing a bug issue would take 24 hours, 48 hours, but in Frostbite it takes 2 to 3 weeks. That's a hardship that you're going to have to deal with, and you can't just say, all right, you know what, scrap this. We're going to just do the whole thing in Unreal now, because now Respawn has shown EA that Unreal Engine is a viable use within their studios, and you could make a profitable game through it. It's too late for that now. You've already built your entire foundation of this. There's no going back. So there's that. There's Drew Karpyshyn, the lead writer for the Mass Effect series, Knights of the Old Republic. He came out recently with his blog and talked about how he's now lead writer for what is the name of the studio? I want to say Archetype Entertainment, which is actually a video I'm gonna do very soon about them, because they're pretty much full of former BioWare developers who are just really done with BioWare. And if you look at his the quotes that he talked about, and Drew has this is the second time Drew left BioWare, and he left the first time right before Mass Effect 3 came out, and it was due to kind of a corporate decision to change his ending of Mass Effect 3, which we talked about the ending before, and it's a very divisive, polarizing ending.
Yeah, we're not going to get into that.
We can't. Ooh.
Yeah. What? I didn't hear that. What?
My instinct was to just start booing.
See, like that ending, and so he left because he got overruled. He's lead writer. He got overruled on the ending.
Slow-mo. I Dizzy saying they should just learn how to use Frostbite. Woo!
I Dizzy seems to know a lot about using Frostbite. When I don't know, we had this discussion on Twitter. We ain't gonna do this today. Look,
is Dizzy a Frostbite stan?
Yes, he is. He's the only Frostbite stan.
I don't think I've ever met a Frostbite stan.
He is the last of the Mohicans. he's the last of the Mohicans over here, fighting for that engine that can't fight for itself. But to get back to the point, like he said that a lot of people have left BioWare, like the veteran developers, their core talent that made so many great games, Jade Empire, Knights of the Old Republic, the Mass Effect series, Dragon Age, all that great stuff. A lot of those guys left because they felt like they couldn't be creative and do what they wanted to do. There was this corporate identity that they had taken over the company, and now it was like it's instead of being their dream job, it's just a job now. And so we have to stop looking at BioWare as what they were and look at who they are now. And who they are now is a studio that made Andromeda. Who they are now is a studio that made Anthem. And hopefully there will be a studio that makes a decent Dragon Age 4, but I can no longer say because the previous Dragon Age games were amazing that this Dragon Age game is going to be good, because it's just not the same people anymore. They don't have Mike Laylaw running Dragon Age anymore. He was the lead director for all the other Dragon Age games. He's not there anymore. So like when you see these changes, and you see the guy that heads the studio is Casey Hudson, who spearheaded that Mass Effect 3 ending. Now you're like, I can't really say you can turn this around. I don't really think they can do it. If they could do it, I would be overjoyed. I still have Anthem installed on my Xbox and my PC. I still play both of them.
Why?
So
why are you taking up unnecessary space in your
it is a fun game. It is a fun game to play. The gameplay loop is fun. It's just the story is absolute. No, it is. No, the story is absolute trash.
That's all right. I agree.
It's a fun game to play.
Hold on, wait.
The story is terrible.
Go ahead.
Hold on, Hoeg. I want to get your thoughts on Anthem real quick. It sounds like you played it. So what are your thoughts?
I definitely played it. One of my most disappointing games of last year. Was very excited about flying around as Iron Man in a jungle fighting alien monsters.
Yep.
And one, I agree that the story world building is just not up to BioWare. Felt very weirdly amateurish. And two, technical issues all over the place, right? I mean, the load times are insane for that kind of drop in and drop out gameplay. And I think fundamentally the model of the game doesn't work, right? You've got BioWare trying to graft on story, even if it was great story, which it isn't, on top of a social co-op game that they really want you to have to play with people, and then stop for 20-minute conversations and things along those lines. So they never quite figured out how to crack that egg in the right way. And I think overall it feels like a muddled mess. But I do agree with the fact that, the flying feels pretty good. On occasion, the fighting feels pretty good. It needs more diverse enemies and enemy types and things that they can do. But if that were to be added, if a more direct, plot that made more sense, that really compelled me, were to be a part of the game, I would love to see Anthem succeed. And one of the things that I said when I looked at this, when this was announced the other day, was that unlike so many of the corporate messages that I analyzed, I did actually like what Casey Hudson had to say, which is, we understand people like certain bits of this. We're going to try to keep those. We understand this has to be essentially burned to the ground and rebuilt. So we're going to keep the current facade up and we're going to build it all in the background. And look, it's easy to say those things, right? I totally get that. And in fact, I think it's more likely than not that they will fail. But I would love for it to succeed because, one, I love BioWare for a long time.
Yeah,
and two, I think Anthem as a concept, as something relatively different from what it actually is right now, is good. I would love to play the Anthem that I imagined when they showed it at that first E3 demonstration.
Right.
Yeah, we all talk about how much we love BioWare, and the thing that saddens me the most is that it's not the same BioWare. It's like corporate BioWare now.
Well, you can't have a B name. You can't be Bethesda or Blizzard or BioWare. It's just you're done.
Yeah,
so you can't name your company with a B.
You can't name it after a B.
it just hit me. They're Blizzard before Blizzard. Like this is the future of Blizzard. The way things are looking.
Oh my goodness!
Like it's what BioWare turned into.
I mean,
look. It's the same stories. A lot of Blizzard devs left because they said that they got the financial people in the game planning meetings. Like,
yes,
how much
the financial people, the CFO were like, like giving him like
We
gameplay
can't do
ideas.
That costs too much money.
Yeah, like
you can't
why
do
is the
that.
CFO here? We're talking about how to make the game. Do you know game design? Get the fuck out of here.
You gotta take out that menu because it's too much money.
Right.
I think BioWare and Blizzard are fully 1/5 of virtual legality episodes here in our 13th month. So they're doing the Lord's work for keeping me employed. On that.
No, but I mean, like seriously, like with the gentleman from Archetype, he mentioned that when they got so big and it became all eyes on them, and the corporate piece got into it because you know how it is. They see this money maker, they're like, oh well, and then it starts. Then they want to make money. They want to start crafting games that are popular, and it takes away from creativity.
So let me defend the corporate executives for just a second. Most of them are exactly as you describe and need to be quarantined and put off in a room somewhere.
Yes.
There are actually good executives that know how to balance the creativity with the profitability that ultimately leads to the biggest pie, right? If you try to squeeze that thing, you squeeze it dry and you kill it in its crib. And if you let the creativity go and you guide it rather than trying to push down on it and have those, what was it said, the financial people in the creation meetings, then you make something great. But, that's a real special skill set. One skill set is just being able to manage a big corporation. That's hard enough. The skill set to also know when you need to step away is almost magical, and you see it pretty rarely. I really do think, Ted and Insomniac is one of those. There are those scattered across the industry, but for every one of those, you do have the executives that like to meddle. So it depends. I don't like. There are good executives out there. There really are.
No, and I'm sure there is. I don't want to villainize the entire gaming industry in terms of like the executives, but I mean the BioWare that we grew up and loved is not the same. It's a skeleton of itself. Or a shell of itself.
Made my favorite game ever.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's not the same BioWare that made Baldur's Gate, Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Dragon Age. Look, and I like to brag about this because I actually had the privilege of doing a podcast with Mike Laidlaw, with the guys from Super. It's not Super Deformed.
Super Deformed.
It's not them, and they changed the name. It's I forget what it is. Super Deluxe, I think, Gamescast now.
Hey, there's a super chat, by the way.
Yes, there's a super chat. Sovereign Cogito, thank you for the $5 super chat. It says BioWare are locked in a suzerain vassal covenant with the EA overlords. BioWare are nothing but AI programmed by the suzerains, EA.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, it's
just read.
Yeah, but I mean, Mike
Crusader
Laidlaw,
Kings 2 thing,
Yeah, Mike Laidlaw was one of the most passionate guys in the industry I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to. I mean, you could just see the passion and the genuine joy when he talked about making Mass Effect or being involved in Dragon Age. I mean, but those guys are gone. I mean, like, it's just, I don't know. I mean, Casey Hudson being back there is great, and maybe I just don't have hope in this game, and
Look, man,
maybe that's a me problem, but I don't know. I mean,
have cautious optimism. There's really nothing to lose. Anthem's already a disappointment. Hope for the best, and if it doesn't turn out, you didn't lose anything because it was gone already.
Yeah.
Buy it on sale right now for $5 if you can.
Yeah.
There you go.
It might become a better game.
Go ahead, B.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, B. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, if they decided to, just stop doing any development for the game and pretty much just shut it down, don't you think that'll leave a bitter taste in everybody's mouth?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
we already got smacked with Mass Effect not being the game that we all wanted, and even though that was a different team, it still felt under BioWare. You know what I mean?
I think that's why they're doing it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think if they would have just stopped development on this game and pretty much threw this under the bus and said they're done with it, you know what I mean? That's two bad apples in a row. Right. And it's like, there's no real hope or, excitement for Dragon Age 4 because we don't even know if that's really going to be a thing at this point. So it's just like, all right, well, if you get
they've already announced Dragon Age 4 is definitely coming out. They did a reveal trailer. Was it like 2 VGAs ago? And they talked about it a little bit.
I mean, they can put all the trailers out they want to, but we know what this BioWare is today. We just said it. Everybody that we loved who made those great games aren't there anymore. So like, what faith do we have that Dragon Age 4 is going to be any good.
True.
We talked about this slow-mo while we were watching E3. We were sitting there saying, man, this is going to be a shit show. Slow-mo was like, I want to be excited for this, but I can't.
Yeah, man. Look, like Dragon Age is like one of my favorite series, and their lead writer, David Gator, excellent writer. Like this guy, he even wrote like the novels that he wrote to supplement the story and the lore. Excellent books. He's not there anymore. He's at a lot of these guys are casualties of this Anthem development. Back when it was Project Dylan, they brought in David Gator off of Dragon Age Inquisition to write the story and create a world for Anthem. He did that. And it just seemed like he's if you look at what his quotes are in the Jason Schreier article, he seemed very disrespected by the leadership over the not leadership in like the whole company, but the leadership and directors over that game, and as well as some of the other staff that kind of felt like, well, this sounds like Dragon Age. I'm like, and he's like, well, Dragon Age has great stories. Like, what do you want? So he left. I mean, and it just seems like so many of these guys have left because of Anthem. I just kind of wanted to die. Just get away from me, like that, because like it's almost kind of like it has like taken out so many people who were so good with with BioWare. Drew Karpyshyn was working on Anthem before he quit. Like it is like the demon that just won't go away and won't die. It keeps coming back for another sequel, and it's just taking more people out with it. It's pretty depressing. I just kind of
that just became a factor of EA trying to chase a trend. You know what I mean? They wanted to have their own Division game. They wanted to have their own Destiny. You know what I mean? And that was what Anthem was supposed to be for them. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. But that was just them chasing a trend instead of sticking to what they knew and what they were good at.
So we got 3 minutes left, and Hope got to go get some sleep so he don't kill himself in these Michigan streets.
That's true.
I do have, trust me, we have the worst roads in the world. I swear to God.
Not worse than the DMV.
I don't know, man.
I don't know, man.
Enrique.
We are very well equipped for snow, but we are not equipped to actually fix our roads after it.
Okay, like we have potholes that could swallow your entire body. Okay.
Yes.
And
they don't fix them. They're around during like springtime. April, May comes around. They're
Exactly.
finally fixing the potholes.
Those potholes have birthdays. You can come by and give it a cake. And happy birthday, you bastard! You messed up.
So the final question I want to ask is: we never talked about Mass Effect so much in a podcast before because the game is old as hell at this point. But Hoeg, man, you're a lawyer. I love your videos, man.
Thanks.
Reality, love it. The Kappa series, I swear to God, I watched more of that than anything because I think everybody was watching all of those videos. But man, I have to put you on a stand. You have to tell me why Mass Effect 1 over Mass Effect 2. You have to tell me. I have to understand this.
Oh yeah, that's a very interesting.
I have to
choice.
know why Mass Effect 1 over 2.
Well, we might as well go all in because Mass Effect 2 is my fourth favorite Mass Effect.
Oh,
wait, what? There's only 4 of them.
only 4 of them.
That's true. It is.
You like Andromeda more than Mass Effect 2?
I do.
Cut the mic. Cut the mic. I can't. I can't do it.
I gotta be honest. I don't know if are you trolling us? Is this?
I'm not trolling. In fairness, all of these games are games that I like. Okay, so we have to start there. Mass Effect 1 is my favorite. Mass Effect 1 is the game that I think had the clearest narrative focus. I think in order to give you my tilt and to explain a little bit where I come from on these things, especially with RPGs, but really all games, I focus on them telling me a good story. And I really think that Mass Effect 1 did that the best in the series. I admit that a lot of it was clunky in terms of the gameplay.
Disjointed as hell?
No, I don't think the story was disjointed, but I do think
the game was disjointed, not the story.
Was clunky, and you had the Mako sections and things like that. But what I really loved was I loved the world building. I loved that codex. I loved, feeling like the universe was at our fingertips, even if they were all mostly blank boxes to drive around with the Mako. I love the end of the thing with Sovereign and really the cliffhanger with the Reapers sitting out there. And then Mass Effect 2 comes around, and for the most part for me, it was a corridor shooter with some light RPG elements that repeated itself with reputation quests, 14 times, to tell a story that basically could slide right out of the Mass Effect universe entirely, and you could go from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 3 and only miss the fact that you didn't get to fight a giant T-800 human cyborg thing at the end in the suicide mission. In terms of why Andromeda is above 2, I think that mostly comes down to the fact that what I wanted to play in the Mass Effect series was something a little bit closer to Star Trek, and exploration and diplomacy and getting out there and exploring something new. And I think 1 and Andromeda focused on that, and 2 and 3 were kind of swallowed up with the doom and gloom and the apocalypse. And 1 and Andromeda, philosophically, were the games I wanted to play. So 3 above 2, Andromeda above 3, 1 at the top.
Wasn't that same codex in 2?
There were a lot of copies of the codex in 2. It's one of the problems I have with 2. If you go look at the codex, it's like 80% copied.
But are you telling me that you enjoy? Are you telling me you enjoy staying in the Citadel for the first 6 hours of that game?
Yes, the Citadel is Midgar. Yeah, it's Midgar.
Let me. All right.
Wait. The worst game ever made. You know it is.
Mass Effect 2's Suicide Mission is one of the greatest gaming achievements that I think that have ever been created.
Slow-mo.
Here's
the fact that you can that literally like your decisions in that mission could affect everything just in that moment, and also how you prepared before that determine whether people even lived or died, whether you had their loyalty or not. It was like this perfect mix, this perfect storm. It was amazing. Yeah. Now to bring it
what was the point of that mission?
The point of that mission was to stop the Reaper and to stop the Collectors from taking humans and turn them into goo and then turn them into Collectors again. That was the point of the whole thing.
To turn them into the giant skeleton person, right?
Yeah, another Reaper, which is apparently how all the Reapers were made.
Giant skeleton.
They stopped the Collectors. The Collectors doing that shut down how the Reapers will be created in the future. Because there's no more Collectors to do that. Okay. So you have that. You also have the best DLC expansion they ever did. Lair, the Shadow Broker that came out of that. You had Arrival, which was great, and it tied into pushing you into Mass Effect 3.
That's the Underwater Reaper?
No. Arrival was the one where Shepard is like basically trying to destroy a relay before the Reapers can get into that relay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the one that the prelude to 3. Okay, yeah.
Yes. So all that's into. You had great characters, great character development. The entire team, and even though you said it's like 14 loyalty missions, every single one of them are different. They're different loyalty missions.
To me, that the strings broke, right? Like you could see that it was all just repetitive. It was all the same thing. Yeah, it's different locations. It's slightly different stories. It didn't feel to me like I was telling a narrative anymore. It felt like I was playing more of a video game, and the game itself became a corridor shooter that was kind of a worse kind of Gears of War.
But I actually can I comment? I want to comment real quick. By the way, Hoeg.
Should give more than 5 minutes for this.
I know. Lord Cognito just said Hoeg just hates the boss in Mass Effect 2. Boss shaming by Hoeg.
Lord Cognito, you can give these guys a super chat if you want to yell at me.
Oh, so I just want to say something. The original. Speaking of the super chat, Sovereign Cognito with the $10 super chat says BioWare not acquired. What does it say? Allegedly perplexing game making.
Let the lawyer read this one.
Extraordinary intellectually counterbalancing. I can't even read. Counterbalancing. What? I don't even know what that is.
Indecipherability.
Indecipherability.
Transcendentalizes intercommunications incomprehensibleness.
Yo, that was written by the ESA.
Yeah. So yeah, that was.
I think it was.
Did you get that one by One Bad Mother?
I did not get the super chat from One Bad Mother. I'm so sorry. Let me go to that.
Let me
real
go
quick.
find it.
I got it right here.
God.
Big shout out to our friend One Bad Mother with a $5 super chat. Says this is for the drink you'll need when you realize you paid to watch a dancing bear at E3. I just want to say something. Hold on. Let me hold on.
No, go ahead.
I just want to comment on the corridor shooting thing. I felt like that gave the Mass Effect 2 a little more focus, because I felt like with Mass Effect 1, the combat was clunky. So there's definitely an improvement.
100% was.
Yeah,
yes.
there was definitely improvement in the combat in Mass Effect 2. And I felt like the pacing was inconsistent in Mass Effect 1. The planet, when you explored the planets, you did it in Mass Effect 2, but in Mass Effect 1, it just seemed a little more shallow, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it seemed empty.
No, that's probably the best word to use.
Yeah. They were very empty. It was just like going to different colors of the moon in various ways with the Mako. Yeah. That, like the only planets in one that really like stood out were like Vermeer, where you went to take the base out, and some of the decision, like I enjoyed one. Like I'm not like Forte thinks one always says one is trash compared to the other ones. I don't think you said that multiple times.
I said one isn't as good as two.
You have used Mass Effect 1 and trash in the same sentence multiple times before.
I like this argument from like 10 years ago.
right. But like. I don't even think it was a choice from like choosing whether to go with what. See, look, I can barely remember these characters' names because they're not even as good as Mass Effect 2's characters. But the girl soldier and the guy Biotic. What are their names again?
Talk about James and
not James. 3? No, I'm talking about Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1.
Oh, damn.
Let's see, there's annoying not Carthonasi. And what was the racist's name?
Yeah, the racist girl. That's Ashley, right. Ashley and the annoying guy who's always complaining because his biotic implant is always bothering him.
It's always bothering him, yeah.
Those two guys. You have a choice between those two. I thought it was like, this is a no-brainer. That guy's annoying. You're racist, but at least you're cute. So I'm keeping her. Like, it was just like, it was a no-brainer. He's like, well, yeah, I could go. Yeah, you go. Like, I don't think anyone.
One had that choice. One had the Rachni choice. Look, yeah. I think a lot of this is tone. One of the things that Mass Effect 2 sets up is this tone of, almost a Deep Space Nine kind of darkness that really isn't that present in Mass Effect 1. And that might work better for you. And you might like the tightness and the focus of the combat of Mass Effect 2 better. In truth, I'm a way outlier on this. So I think most people do. And that's fine with me. First of all, I want everybody to love everything that they play. So I think it's great that so many people love Mass Effect 2. I still like Mass Effect 2. It's just last on my Mass Effect list. Because I think that focus that leads it to its combat in the corridor shooting makes it not unique. It makes it a worse Gears of War. And that's just basically where I landed on it. And then when the mission turns out to be now one of the things that happened with the suicide mission for me personally was I didn't find any of the choices difficult. I chose what I chose. Everybody lived, and I thought that the choices were pretty obvious. So I didn't get that kind of magical moment that a lot of people talk about, and I'm glad that they had it, but I didn't share it. So I sit here saying, all right, it was a corridor shooter. You mostly did meet the guy, loyalty mission, finish with a bug fight against a giant skeleton, and the Reapers are still in inner space, and it's exactly where you left Mass Effect 1. So, yep, I didn't hate playing it, but I didn't feel like much was accomplished. And so Mass Effect 2 kind of falls on the bottom of my list. I'm sorry. On the next BRAP, we can talk about why Resident Evil 4 is the worst Resident Evil.
Oh, okay. You know what? Hoeg. Hoeg.
Another spicy take.
All right, guys. Let's wrap up the show because I know Hoeg's got to get going and we've gone over. But Hoeg, we got to get you back on. When we get you back on,
absolutely.
I want to take. Yeah, I definitely want to table a couple things here. One, the Respawn comment from earlier.
Sure.
Resident Evil 4.
Yeah,
And,
make sure you write all this stuff down.
Yeah. And
This
then,
is going to be an indictment of Hoeg here.
and then,
All right.
and then maybe a little more Mass Effect, but we got to get you
Yeah,
back on, man.
we do have to figure out how you got Andromeda over Mass Effect 2 somehow. Like I can understand one, I can understand it, but Andromeda, woo.
Oh, we got some color from the
Yeah,
Iron
see,
Lords.
look, Iron Lords paid you. All right, you can yell at me now.
All right. Big shout out to the ILP with the $5 super chat. Hoeg is minimizing Mass Effect 1, clunky Mako, awful low times and bad combat. Mass Effect 2 is superior at all levels. Andromeda is disbar worthy. Still love you, Hoeg.
Trying to come after your livelihood.
If
Oh
you
man.
can explain to the Michigan bar what this argument is about at all, you deserve to get me disbarred.
They probably say, "What the hell is this?"
They average the age of like 70. They don't know what the hell you were talking.
Oh my goodness, that is too funny. All right, guys.
I respect your opinion on it. It's just
No, I think it's great. Honestly, I it is not one of those where it's trash. First of all, I don't feel that way about any game anybody loves. I'm glad you love it. It's just bottom of my list. I like the other ones better.
I mean, it could be like 3.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah. So 3 has I think really great conclusions to the major race conflicts that I really love. The ending is trash.
I agree with that.
Ending
I
is
agree.
terrible.
Yeah.
I think it's got problems in its overall plot with having you essentially go and do side missions when otherwise, Earth is under attack the entire game. But
Right.
Yeah, I didn't like that
love
either.
How those conflicts ended. And I like the breadth of the endings. You can really screw some of those races, and I really think they did a great job with that.
Yeah, like the Krogans. You could basically just
You can screw them.
You can
but-
screw them and then lie to their face
Glorians.
about it. Yeah. It's like, oh no, you guys are straight. You guys are gonna have all kinds of kids now. No,
yeah,
you're
right? Yeah, no, you're not. Psych.
No, I love that midsection of that game, and I like it better than what's in 2 and Andromeda. So
That's
sorry
why
about
we should
that.
just go-
If I'm barred, it's fine.
No, you're fine, man. We just love it's a spicy take, and we had to take our shots at you. It's
Of
all
course.
good.
That's where the fun lives.
Right.
Well, I just want to give give a big thank you to Hoeg for joining us this evening. Hoeg, it was
Absolutely.
great having you on, man. Seriously, very insightful. Really appreciate your insight. I did drop the link to your YouTube channel, Hoeg
Awesome.
Law, in the actually in the live chat as well, and I'm going to add it to the. I'm always careful adding people's YouTube channels because I don't know if sometimes people are like, oh, what, but I will definitely add your channel.
No, I have my channel. Absolutely. I love to have people in virtual legality. We have a lot of good discussions. We lightly touch on some topics people are very passionate about. We did a video on Roger Stone today. Some people have some thoughts. And so,
my God.
I can imagine.
Jump in at your discretion. The water's just fine. But
Hoeg, are you shocked that certain district attorneys or for the Justice Department resigned after that announcement was made?
I'm not shocked that they resigned. I think the basic question is exactly where the communications breakdown was there. Having those two memos go out essentially within 14 hours of each other is very, very unusual. There was always going to be that resignation. The question is really whether that was specifically forced by the attorneys or not. And I think your answer to that question largely rests, as best as I can tell, on which political persuasion you are.
I was going to say that's a great point. I was going to say that too.
My video primarily talks about sentencing guidelines and how they work and what I thought was being missed in terms of context in the articles that I was reading this morning. So when I can give that insight, I try to. And my big disclaimer at the front of this video is, hey, a lot of political thoughts can happen about these things. That's not what this is about. Please keep it civil. I understand that you can have thoughts about various conspiracies, right or wrong, on either side of this. So we're going to try to not do that here, but I'm sure you'll bring it to my comments.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So thank you again, Hoeg. We'll drop the link in the description as
Absolutely,
well.
please do.
And big shout out to the rest of the panel here. Please, everyone, check out Slow Mo Backslap's YouTube channel. He just put out a great video regarding the updates that are going to be made to the Division 2 and some of the newer announcements for that game. And please check out Gaming Forte's YouTube channel, which is the link. He's going to be dropping a video soon regarding Geoff Keighley not being at E3. So please check out those channels, and big shout out to the rest of the panel, B Money and Eric Jackson, and everyone in the live chat. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who hit us with the super chats. Definitely appreciate that. And we'll be back again next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Although, you never know, a rant could always drop between now and next Wednesday. So on that note, we are out. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the evening. Enjoy gaming. And remember, PC Master Race rules. Peace.